The Pacific Northwest. Now, what do you think of when you hear Pacific Northwest? A lot of people will think of lush green forests and tall mountain ranges. But one thing that people always think of is Bigfoot. Now, who is Bigfoot, you're probably wondering? Well, that's what I'm here to talk to you today about. I'm going to be telling you a little bit about the history of Bigfoot, the evidence we have of Bigfoot, and also a possible video that we have of Bigfoot and whether or not that's a hoax. Now, the first thing I'm going to go over is the history of Bigfoot. Bigfoot is mainly found in West Canada, Washington, Oregon, and California. The earliest account we have of Bigfoot is from early Native American tribes. These tribes believed that Bigfoot was what they call a wild man or being. And in the Oregon Encyclopedia, written by Robert Walls, he writes, "Coastal Oregon related Bigfoot to ancient tales of wild men who lured near villagers and left immense tracks." He also writes, "Members of plateau tribes, such as those of the Western Spring Reservation, identify Bigfoot as a stick Indian, a diverse category of potentially hostile beings who stole salmon and confused people by whistling, causing them to become lost." Now, the first record we have in Oregon of Bigfoot was in 1904, when settlers in Sixes River area of the coast came to settle, I guess. They called him, or it, I should say, they don't know the gender, the hairy wild man. Now, in later decades, miners and hunters started to encounter this creature as well. In 1924, on Mount St. Helens, miners had been attacked by what they call giant ape, who left tracks as well. Now, this is a big thing. Leaving tracks is the main evidence point that people came across. Now, after 1958, loggers started to report these sites and tracks of Bigfoot, and who actually later became a part of their job culture. Robert Walls writes, "Manifested as serious stories, jokes, chainsaw sculptures, and fabricated prints as playful pranks." Now, this was all done in the loggers community, their job culture, which is why today we see many log sculptures of Bigfoot. Now, after this, Bigfoot became really popular, and he started out as what Becky Little describes as a primal, dangerous creature out of the past who lurked in modern wilderness. Now, after this, in around 1980s, all this thought of Bigfoot being hostile suddenly changed, and he became a sudden symbol of wilderness and was portrayed as kind and misunderstood, according to Becky Little. And then we start to get into popular culture that we have today, he suddenly became a mascot. He became big in children's entertainment, and as we see a lot along the coast, he became a big figure in gift shops. You can buy him as little keychains, there's little license plates, notebooks, all that kind of fun stuff. Now, on to my next point, the evidence that we have of Bigfoot. Now, the main evidence point that we have is footprints. Now, the first ever recorded evidence was from History.com, and it was about 1958 in Humboldt Times. They had a letter come in from a reader saying that they had found footprints. Loggers had found footprints in California. Now, this article the person who wrote this article in this newspaper kind of thought it was a joke and was like, oh, haha, maybe he's related to Yeti. Like, oh, he's leaving these gigantic footprints. But little did he know that this would spark a huge concept of Bigfoot today. Now, going into National Geographic, they made a little short clip that I took, or that I watched, where Jeff Meldrum, who is a PhD in, PhD in primate movement and biology and whatnot, he has over about 200 footprints that are cast of all these evidence that's come in throughout the years. And he says that there is a really big difference between human footprints and Bigfoot footprints. Now what he did is he took about 100 of these casts and he morphed them all together and reverse engineered it to kind of get a perspective of how Bigfoot foot looks. And the biggest difference he found was on your foot. If you think of a foot, there's the heel and then there's the toes. Now, in a human, we have a big arch between the heel and the toe. And that is what they call the mid-tarsal joint. And so we have very limited range of movement with that joint. But he found that in the footprints he had reverse engineered, the Bigfoot footprints didn't have that arch. They had a flat foot, meaning that their mid-tarsal joint, right in front of your heel, could move a lot without this part moving of your foot. Now, another kind of interesting thing people think of with evidence is, hey, have there been any bones? Well, in fact, we have not found any bones. But, according to National Geographic, there is a possible explanation as to why we don't have any bones as evidence. As Jeff Meldrum says in the clip, a comparison can be made to the survival of chimpanzee remains. In fact, published studies have documented between the action of scavengers and the very acidic soils in these wet tropical forests, bones just did not survive for very long. Now, that makes sense, since acidic oil can break down, or not acidic oil, acidic soil, could break down bones very fast. Now, we also have visual evidence, as people orally tell. They describe him as, half-covered bipeds with ape-like features up to 8 feet tall and leave correspondingly large footprints. And some even describe a foul old odor coming from Bigfoot. And this was all found in an organized encyclopedia written by Robert Walls. Now, the last point I'm going to show you guys is a little video that was taken in 1967 by 2 former rodeo men who were out in Bluff Creek, California. They were taking this sort of small video when they suddenly came across this creature. And I'm going to show you that clip real quick when I find my remote. There it is. Get it to play. Hold on. There we go. It's a little shaky at first because he was trying to run to it. But as he starts to kind of steady the camera, you can very clearly see a man, or what they call Bigfoot, walking right there. Now, this has been up for debate for over the past 50 years, whether or not this is actual evidence of Bigfoot. Now, there have been a lot of evidence of Bigfoot that have been proven as hoaxes. But this is the main video that people see the face of Bigfoot as. Now, a lot of people have been like, oh, it's not really Bigfoot, because they've had a person come out saying, oh, I was the man dressed as this guy in the video. I made this costume in this video. But someone did a comparison of the two. And looking at the two, you can see the muscles of the body, which is very hard to do in a suit, especially back in 1967. So, is Bigfoot really real? No one quite knows the answer to that, but we do have some evidence. And we do have a fun culture surrounding Bigfoot. So, if you want to go out and have fun trying to find Bigfoot, be my guest. But now you know a little bit more about who Bigfoot is, what he represents, and kind of what evidence to look out for. So I hope you guys enjoyed my speech.